Hello, everybody, and welcome to Creatives Who Thrive. I'm your host, Deven Berryhill, and this is the show where we share stories from artists who make money to make more art. That's really the vision of the program, is to help other people in the creative world who are wanting to monetize what they're doing in their creative work, whether it be painting, whether it be music or writing, publishing, filmmaking, and in today's case, journalism and film editing and such. So really excited about this program. Our guest is someone I know a couple different ways, but mainly he's a news anchor here in San Diego for a number of years on KUSI television. Some of you from San Diego, if you're watching, remember Tom Jordan. And he's also filmed as a correspondent for NBC. He is a Emmy winner. He has won the Edward R. Murrow and the AP award-winning journalist he is. So anyway, currently he serves at WWJ in Detroit. So please welcome with me to the podcast, Tom Jordan, everybody.
Hey, Devin, thanks for having me. What a privilege to be on your podcast, which I love, by the way. And congratulations on this fabulous podcast. And I think you're covering a niche that needs to be covered. You know, there's a lot of people that have tremendous talent and gifts. And there's sometimes I had the same kind of mentality that there's not really a way to make money off something you're passionate about. But thanks to you, you're highlighting some of the cases that indicate otherwise.
Yeah. So far, I've interviewed a number of people now, and I'm really excited to hear your story. A common theme that is coming across is things like discipline and mentorship and community. And we're going to dig into all that kind of stuff and how that all plays into monetizing your creativity. But before we get started, give us kind of the short version of how you first began. I know you were a surfer here ago, went to San Diego State, and tell us the story of how you got it from where you are starting out then to being in journalism.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I had a passion for storytelling. I think I'd always had that, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the news. I was a big kind of a news junkie. That's, I think, an overused term, but I enjoyed watching the newscast every evening in my house. I thought it was important to stay informed and then to understand how to communicate effectively based on some premise or layer of truth. And so journalism to me was something that just combined a lot of elements. I loved video, I loved editing, I loved storytelling, writing, verbally communicating. So journalism, especially broadcast television, combined all these elements that for me were fantastic. So you can write a story, you can show what's going on, whether it be live or you can do recorded pieces, and things changed every day. So I really liked kind of current events. And so that was, and the style of writing that journalism provided me was right up my alley. I wasn't the best essayist, or I enjoyed reading novels, but I never wanted to write a novel where the climax kind of comes at the end. I wanted to know right off the top, what's the big deal? What's going on? How does this thing end? And news kind of has that built into it. So we start at the climax of the story. It's the first line of whatever it is in print or broadcast. And then you go from there. And so I loved it. And I remember watching these newscasts in San Diego when I was a kid, and old guys like Paul Bloom and Stan Miller, who in the 80s was a big name. And got to really get a bunch of, the Doug Curley, all these older guys now that I grew up watching, Gene Cubison, and those are the TV guys, Hal Clement even. So I thought that'd be great one day if I could do that, but I would never be able to do it because it was something I wanted to do so badly, it would never pan out. And I knew it was very competitive. So I didn't initially give it a try. Because I also found it very important to take care of my family eventually. I was going to get married. I wanted to have kids. And really I had priorities in life. And to me, it was my faith, and then it was going to be family. And then it was the undergirding of all of that, which is kind of making a living. And if I can throw some passion into that as well, in terms of enjoying what I do for a living, all the better. Well, I finally came around after realizing what I thought about getting into the medical field was something I wasn't truly passionate about, and is very, very difficult to do. My wife and I finally came to agree one with another that, hey, I really enjoy journalism. Let's give it a shot. When I changed my major back to that, so I did. And lo and behold, I ended up getting a job at an NBC station in Washington State and making $15,500 a year. But to me, it was monetization. Like, right. It's monetization. And it's like, well, I get paid to do something I already enjoy. So I went up there and that's how you start. You mentioned discipline earlier. Proverbs talks a lot about discipline. Proverbs 14:23, I think. It's, if you work hard, you're going to be able to provide. If you just had this idle chatter, it might be good to talk about it. But if you're not working towards it, you're going to end up in poverty. Yeah. So there's a discipline, there's hard work. Things do not just come your way. And fortunately, I learned that young, and I was able to work in a field that I really enjoyed the work, and was able to eventually monetize it to the point where I could support a wife and kids.
Yeah. A lot of people I've interviewed have, during their younger days when they weren't married and didn't have kids, they really put the pedal to the metal, whether it be schooling, education, of course, and then whether if you're in a band, you're in the van touring, day in, day out. I mean, did you have that kind of season as well, where it was just kind of you had the extra time to put into it like that, or is it you were married when you were in college and made that shift? I mean, was it a while till you had kids? I mean, how did that work?
I had a kid when I was. I was in a predicament where I was being told in college, listen, if you're married and you already have a kid, you probably shouldn't do this because you got to pay your dues. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to support a family, this isn't the way to go. I mean, a few years down the road, and I thought about it, and that was really something that really troubled me. But I had this kind of feeling in the back of my mind that, listen, this is the way to go. I feel like I know what I'm doing in this. I understand the craft of journalism. I enjoy it. I'm willing to work hard. On top of that, my wife, I love her so much. And she was willing to go along with me. I had one child at that point, and she was, I think if she wasn't the way she loved me for who I was at that time, we were, looking back, we were probably living under the poverty level, but we were happy. Right. So, and we were young in our 20s. We're like, let's go for it. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? Right. But if I work hard, it's almost inevitable you're going to advance. So let's just do it. We'll work hard and we'll love one another while we do it. So fortunately, I had a beautiful wife. I still do, same wife. That's 26 years ago or so, and thank God for her. And we did it together.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So you went to, was I correct? You went to San Diego State, correct? And did you?
I did not. Here's what happened. So I was about to go to San Diego State. I was actually in a journalism program at Grossmont College, and then taking some courses at San Diego City. And I was about to go to State, and I got a great job offer up in Washington State at an NBC station. And my professors and my fellow students said, take the job. You can always go back to school, but take it. You'll be lucky to get this job when you graduate. And if you get the offer now, just go for it. So my wife and I were like, yeah, let's do it. I didn't, I was one of those weird, it always bothered me in a sense, because education is extremely important to me. But I at that point had taken enough coursework in journalism and a lot of my general ed that I think I felt like I had the know-how at that point to at least get in the field. And there's nothing like on-the-job training. So when I got into my first job, I learned more in a week than I did in a full semester in any class I was taking at school. So it was like a little bit trial by fire, but it was a really great learning experience. And so my philosophy is, if you've got a bird in the hand type of thing, if you've got the job offer, swallow your pride a little bit and do it, go for it. That's what I did.
It kind of sounds like almost like the kid who plays baseball in high school, and usually you would go into college ball or something like that and gets the offer to go to the big leagues, or at least maybe a minor league with a track to the big leagues right up top. You kind of got to make that decision. A lot of times the parents want the kids to go to college, and, they're thinking more of their long-term future. You kind of got the offer to go up to the big leagues right up, or at least I don't know what you would call the market up there, but a larger market, NBC. I mean, that's a major affiliate station of one of the big three.
Yeah, the risk was I may never get a job. And in my class, there was another student who had sent out 100 resumes and videos and had not one job offer. I sent out one and got an offer right away. Wow. And I thought, okay, this might be a sign that I should take this opportunity. It's very difficult, very competitive, especially at the outset. So we decided this was the right thing to do.
So you packed up the VW bug and
pretty much. I think it was almost broken down. I think we had a Honda Accord, but it was like a 10-year-old version, like a 1981 version in 1990, whatever it was. And we went up.
Mine was a Mazda GLC. I moved to Seattle. So,
oh, you did? Yeah.
Yeah, we drove. My honeymoon was a drive from San Diego to Seattle, and some of the nights we camped.
Yeah. We've had many guys sleeping in our car. Those are great stories. You look back, it was fun though. You're young and you can go through it as long as you have some joy and you have hope at the end of it. It's not always going to be like this, Sure. It's fun. It's fun to go through.
That's great. So you're in Washington, you're working for an NBC affiliate. And so what's next? What happened?
Well, I was there for a year. I did not like where I was living necessarily. I was still young and I kind of got a little homesick. I missed San Diego and California. So I started sending out resumes from there. I had garnered some experience and got a job offer at another NBC station in Palm Springs for the main news anchor at that station. It was a pay increase. It was close to home. So we jumped on that and we got the job, and I was there for about 8 years until I finally got what I considered my dream job back in San Diego as an anchor and a reporter there. So we finally ended up in San Diego, and this was a dream in the sense that I got to go back home, work in my home market, and get paid to do something I really, really enjoyed. And so it was a blessing beyond belief. And I got to work. I mentioned guys like Paul Bloom and Doug Curley. I was working side by side with these guys. And I told Paul Bloom when I first got there, I said, I used to work for you, and I used to watch you back in the 70s when I was a little kid. And he gave me one of those looks like, he was happy that I used to watch him, but he wasn't happy that he was that much older than I was, working side by side. But it was neat to work along people, and you've experienced that in music too. You work alongside, some heroes in terms of heroes in the industry you want to be a part of. Mm-hmm. You as a musician, me as a broadcast journalist, and so it was a wonderful thing. I was real happy about it, but it took a lot of work. It was discipline. It was and cooperation with those you love. You know, they're sacrificing too. It's not just me who had to make the sacrifice. It's my wife. I could have gotten into a career that made more money in the offset. And she was, she paid some price alongside her husband. And so did my son in the early years. But in the later years, it paid off. We're happy.
That's an amazing story. So I assume the station you're talking about is KUSI when you landed back here in San Diego.
Yeah. KUSI in San Diego. And funny thing happened that we, unbeknownst to me years ago, suddenly had a desire to move on out of California. And for a variety of reasons, but we saw a shift in the I don't want to call it the politics, but the way that some of the educational systems were kind of leaning, and our kids were starting to come of age, and we wanted to do some different things. And so my wife told me, she goes, I'll go wherever. She's just a beautiful woman. She said, I'll go wherever. It doesn't matter where we go in this country, Tom, I'll go wherever, except Detroit, Michigan. She goes, I won't go to Detroit, but I'll go anywhere else. I said, no problem. And sure enough, the call comes from a CBS station in Detroit, Michigan. And that was the one that wanted to hire us. And so that's where we ended up. And we've been here about just over 8 years.
Wow. Has it been that long?
Yeah, no. Yeah, it has. It's gone by fast.
So you've made the shift from TV, though, to radio side for this one, right?
I did. And that was another unanticipated shift in my career. But I did it. A, I wasn't planning to go to Detroit, and B, I wasn't planning to go into radio. And both of those proved to be significant challenges in the sense that you're really plucked out of your comfort zones in a couple of different areas. One, you're moving to a region of the country you've never been before. I'd never been to Michigan. I'd never been to Detroit. Obviously, that's in Michigan. And there's all the stereotypes around that lend you to start wondering if this was the right move. But then on top of that, it was a shift from television to radio, which now I love. But at first it was, I had to, when you're in this craft, I call it a craft because it is journalism. And there's different tracks within journalism. So television and radio, they're related because they're both broadcast, and it was both journalism. So WWJ was a station. It's much like a KNX out in Los Angeles, which you get in San Diego. And in fact, that's our sister station. It's all news, 24/7, very fast paced, lots of writing, lots of movement. You're on the air 5 hours straight, live shots, reads, reporters, and just stuff coming in. And it turns out Detroit's a very, very, very solid news market. So there's a lot happening, a lot to cover. So it's very fast paced, which I enjoyed, but very serious. And there was an element of, if you're not from here, you better prove yourself, or else you're not going to really be accepted into the mix. So there was that transition period as well. And so there's a lot of things coming at me, but I still had this conviction that this was the right thing to do. And there was some testing involved. There's some defining of, or I guess molding and shaping of character. We got to remember that as we're moving through life, there are challenges that we want to embrace, and they're very difficult. But what happens through those challenges, if we go through it and we embrace them, and people call it like leaning in, leaning into the challenges. You hear that in different spaces, whether it's business world or even a lot of spirituality in the church and elsewhere, where they say, these difficulties, some people call them trials, they're going to make you better in the end. And there's a point to them. So we embraced it. We went through it. It was hard, but we found out this is so much better than what it was for a variety of reasons. And I can get into that if you want, but really it's just the point is more that success does not mean things are easy. Doesn't mean you're going to be kept in a bubble. There's always more advancement to come. And advancement doesn't always mean more money. For me, this was an increase in pay. So that was a blessing as well. A more monetization of this craft as I gained experience through the years of communicating. I love communication. I love trying to investigate the truth and being able to question certain premises, and they may be faulty premises. But if you're broadcasting out to maybe hundreds of thousands of people, you want to make sure you're presenting them something that's truthful and beneficial to them. Right. And to me, that's a craft that this is the same in music. You can be a phenomenal musician, or you can be a phenomenal painter. But if the end user doesn't derive any benefit from it, and you're only pleasing yourself, it's very hard to monetize something like that. And I believe God has given each a gift and a talent to enhance and to kind of grow for the benefit of others. And so whether it's in art, whether it's in some other craft, whether it's in a skilled trade, a lot of people like working with, the skilled trades is a whole nother area. It's not really artistic, but it can be in a sense where someone is gifted with this know-how, how to do something that they enjoy, but it also benefits so many other people. That's the real key, that and hard work, to monetizing something that you're passionate about. It's got to benefit somebody else more than just yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, content, right? For us in music, it's songwriting in a lot of ways. It's like everything starts with the song. If you don't have a good song, you could put the best lead guitar part or the best vocalist or producers on it. It doesn't matter. It's kind of lipstick on a pig kind of thing. Right.
Yeah. Right. And so exactly. And so content for music, it would include a lot of different aspects. It's the lyrics, of course, is that, but it's the music as well can speak volumes. My mother was a classical pianist, and there weren't lyrics involved, but there was so much emotion that conveyed a message. It's why she loved music. It's why I love music. My brother is a classical, he's a clarinetist, but also a conductor. And there's so much meaning behind. It boggles my mind. I have a huge respect for musicians. I never got to that level that my brother or my mother or you got to, even though I respect it. I didn't have confidence in my ability to continue down that path into later in life and to monetize it like you've been able to. But I have a tremendous respect because it is so difficult. It is so, people, with a musician, it's like you want to go and listen to somebody who's an expert, whether it's a celloist or a cellist or a guitarist, violinist or a saxophone, an expert in that field. You don't want to go listen to somebody who is horrible at it because it just is painful to your ears. But if you're an expert, it's beautiful. And so how do you get that type of, how do you merge the expertise of a musician, for example, with also having a business mindset to be able to monetize something that's so valuable? It's difficult to do. And that's why if you're capable of doing that, that's a blessing. But oftentimes we have to surround ourselves with others who have the gift of monetizing or business or understanding marketing in that realm. So that's the team effort. That sometimes we need to be willing to include others in our work.
Yeah. Yeah. The community part I was going to talk to you about. That's kind of a recurring theme that we're seeing is particularly in, I just interviewed a guy who does television editing, sound and video editing for TV shows. And he was telling me that he used to be a weekly gathering where they would sit around in a circle and someone would have their screenplay or something, and they would hand out the script to maybe 8 or 10 people around a round table. And each person would take a part, and my friend would be like the narrator. And then the persons whose work it was would sit there and listen to them play out the parts to the show or whatever. And they would be able to hear it back. And there would be this critique, other people would speak into it. Did you have any time in your life where there was kind of like that, maybe like in news where you guys would sit around the table and discuss the different stories that you would go over, or in college?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So in the news business, we have editorial meetings, and a lot of time we would have those meetings prior to a newscast, and then we'd have what they call a postmortem. The editorial meeting after the newscast to critique it, and then to talk about the next day as well. And you have to allow yourself to be critiqued, to open yourself up to that. Whether it's the horribly written story that didn't communicate the real gist of it, or we may have mischaracterized somebody or an entire organization, or we missed the story. Like that wasn't the story. The story was this, and you decided to take it to some other direction that totally missed out. You missed the mark, and so you have to subject yourself to that kind of critique. And for me, it even extended to my family, because I'm in the business where I can't hide what I'm doing at work. And my wife would watch me on the news, and I would come home
today. There he is.
Yeah, there he is. Yeah, but not only that, critique me like, oh, I couldn't watch it when you did that. That was awful. And I'm like, but it was a learning experience, and it's tough to hear these things, but you have to have people who are willing to be honest around you. And then you've got to be able to listen to it, but also, yeah, it's huge. And if you're not willing to do that, and a lot of people are not, you're not going to grow, and you may not succeed. You have to be willing. It's not an easy road to if you want to do well in any aspect. If you're living your life to be comfortable, then you're probably not going to have that much of an impact. But if you're willing to go through some hardship, and that means some self-critique and some humiliation and kind of a denial of yourself, like, why are you doing this? Is it selfishly ambitious? And then that's not the best kind of wisdom to glean from. If you want real wisdom, deny yourself. You'll be at peace. You can take this critique a little bit more, and you will improve. Doesn't mean everyone else is right either. So there's some discernment. Their opinion is their opinion, but consider it, because they can see things you can't. So it's very helpful to have those editorial meetings, and they would get pretty heated. I've been the subject of some of the heat, and I've also dished it out as well. But that's why they're there. That's why we have those meetings.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And back, I wanted to touch on too some of the guys that you worked with. Was there a particular mentor, someone who was really kind of that guiding light, and you could call and go, man, I'm underwater here. I'm treading water here. Help me out. What am I not seeing?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say there was a particular one person who mentored me and walked me through it. And I think part of the reason for that is in the news business, it's so fast paced. People don't want to take on that role, which is kind of a shame. But I think what happened for me is that there were a bunch of mentors in my life, and I would watch people. I would see their style when they would write a really good lead into a story, or how they would handle breaking news. I watched and not mimicked, but learned from, try to adapt my style and my knowledge based on the people I worked with. And there were a lot of them, and they didn't always know that I was analyzing how they did things. Paul Bloom would be one of them. He was phenomenal at breaking news, but there's a lot of people. I mean, David Davis was a good friend of mine. He passed away. Horrible motorcycle accident. Right after he came out here to Michigan to see me, and a few days later he passed. But he was a guy that I really enjoyed his unique style of reporting and anchoring. So I think there wasn't a single mentor in that particular industry, but there were just a lot of them. And I think if you can surround yourself with a lot of different people, you will learn a lot of ways to do things well. And you can also look at people and say, that's not the way I want to do that either. So you learn a lot from watching people and working with others as well.
Yeah. Now, in your travels here in San Diego, I hear this one guy. Did you ever get in touch with Ron Burgundy? Was he in your circle there?
Yeah, he was a huge
he was in San Diego, right?
Yeah, he was beloved by everyone in San Diego.
Yeah.
I really it's funny that you bring that up, because at the time that movie came out, I would be standing doing a live shot in downtown San Diego, and people would shout out, "Hey, it's Ron Burgundy!" It was the joke. It was funny. It was coincidental, maybe, that San Diego got chosen to be the local market for Anchorman, the movie. So that was a very funny. It turns out, though, that Will Ferrell, who played the part of Ron Burgundy, he met with Paul Bloom, by the way. He had that mustache and the old 70s look. He looked like Paul Bloom in the 70s. Yeah. But there were a lot of guys. Harold Green was another guy he met with. But it turns out that Will Ferrell, he kind of mimicked a guy named Mort Krim, who was a news anchor back then in Detroit, Michigan, of all places. Oh, no. And that's the guy he finally said that he patterned Ron Burgundy after. To me, all these guys wanted to be the pattern, the guy that, I'm like, why? They were insulting you. They weren't complimenting you. They were making fun of you. Why do you want to be that guy? Even though you are.
That was kind of the Spinal Tap of news program, right? Remember Spinal Tap?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Rob Reiner.
Yeah, the self-destructing drummer. I believe the drummer kept getting killed off. I believe in that movie. It was.
Did you have any Ron Burgundy moments yourself?
I did. Well, in terms of, there was so many bloopers. I don't think I will.
Ron Burgundy moment for us.
Ron Burgundy moment. I think the bloopers, I can share bloopers. I don't know if I want to say I was Ron Burgundy, but some people thought I was. You get this voice, you start talking like, the worst part about my industry is that you speak for a living and you have to project your voice, and you've got to be a hair more animated on camera than you are in real life. But it's very difficult to transition from that to when you go home or when you're talking to friends. So I've been accused of carrying my news voice into my personal life, and you have to watch it because it's unfortunate. You become this caricature of who you really are. And I come home, "Hi, honey, how you doing? What's for dinner tonight?"
Yeah.
Why are you talking to me like that? Oh, sorry.
The kids are like, "Sally, better take out the trash before you go to bed. Film at 11."
Yeah, exactly. Why is the garbage disposal plugged up once again? Yeah, you've got to.
Hearing in my head.
It's horrible. I've had friends tell me you've got that news pattern stamped in your voice, and it's like, oh. Yeah. So that, but there's been a lot of bloopers where the prompter goes out and. You've got to kind of go on the fly. There was one instance where I had a producer in San Diego who she wanted you to just do things on the fly to make it sound like it was super important. It's so important that we have no idea yet what's going on. So she would, this one time, here's an example of it. It was Good Morning San Diego on KUSI. It was a television newscast. And she yells in her ear, "We're going live to Chicago. We got a helicopter shot. We're going to go right now. Take it." And we're like, "Well, what's going on?" We don't know. Just start talking about it. So we're sitting there with zero information, taking a live shot in Chicago, Illinois. We had no idea what was going on. So we just had to ad lib as if something very, very important was happening in Chicago. And we never did figure out what was happening, but we sure did make it sound important.
So we have this live feed, and we're downtown, and it's like you're looking, well, there's a car went by, right?
Yeah,
there's a lady walking down the street. Wow.
What you're looking at right now is, this is the Chicago skyline. You can see the cars passing one another here. This is from the helicopter above the city of downtown Chicago. We're not getting a whole lot of information about what's happening, but when we do, we'll bring it right to you. Oh, and that's essentially it. And it's like, there it is. We didn't tell you anything at all.
There it is, man. You did it. Thank you. That was cool. I feel like I was on the news, man. I'm here back at home watching the news with Tom Gordon. So let's transition a little bit here. We're having some fun, but is there any technical things that are happening right now for you in journalism, TV, radio, something that like for musicians, big things happened, like particularly in the early 2000s, like Spotify, digitizing. Now, obviously social media, different platforms. We've got things like TikTok coming out now, changing how marketing's I mean, a lot of stuff's going on in communication. Is there anything that you're focused on that you're like, there's something there that maybe our viewers could benefit from, or at least keep an eye on?
Yeah. Well, there's something major, I think, to keep an eye on. So, back, you mentioned the 2000s and the first part of this century, there was the digital revolution. So we went from analog to digital, and that was a big shift. And we kind of considered that we won't have to do something that major again, but we went through it, and it was for the betterment of broadcast journalism and broadcasting in general. But what happened, obviously, later, 2005 is when YouTube was born. The first video on YouTube, by the way, was the San Diego Zoo. So really it was, birthed in San Diego, essentially, the guy that started YouTube. A short little video at the San Diego Zoo. But so that was 2005. After that, there was such an incredible transition of social media. Twitter was not far along after that. Same with Facebook. It was MySpace and Facebook. The advent of social media has completely changed the news industry in ways that I don't think we could have imagined. Mm-hmm. We used to take note of social media and watch how they would watch us in the broadcast world and in the paper and whatnot. And now what's happened is the reverse. Television journalists, radio journalists, print journalists are now watching social media feeds to get a better sense of what's happening in the world. And that has radically changed the way that journalism is conducted. We can now go with sources that haven't been fully vetted, or not even vetted at all, just something that's popped up on Twitter, and we'll go on the air with it. So-and-so is saying this now in 140 characters, or now 280 characters. That's not a source. And what's happened is deeply concerning to a lot of people in the industry. But then there's a lot of people in this industry who have just gone along with it on the flip side. And that is a lot of inaccurate information. Social media was not subject to the same vetting process that was once required in journalism. You couldn't go to air with just someone says this, and let's talk about it. That's considered gossip. That's gossip. Anybody can do that. Anybody can say something, and then we repeat it, and then repeat it again. That's not journalism. At least it didn't used to be. Nowadays, it is. So we can have a senator come and just say something horrific about another senator, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to put it on the air nowadays. In my view, it's incredibly dangerous, because we're shaping people's opinions. And this is what I remind people. They say, well, it's just the news. But no, people have very strong opinions about what's happening in our world. And I remind them, where are they getting the information for that opinion? They're not talking to the original source. They're not talking to Chuck Schumer. They're not talking to Donald Trump. They're not speaking with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. They're not speaking with them directly. They're not talking to Bill Gates. They're not speaking with Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer. No, they're watching it on the news, or they're reading it, or they're watching social media and forming their opinion about what they think is reality. And what they don't understand is that this is not reality. This is gossip. And this is where, in my view, journalism has come to this point of we are just gossiping, and a lot of politicians who are supposed to be held accountable in terms of, okay, they say one thing, let's see if they're really doing that. That is less and less a part of our narrative on our newscast, and it's more about what people are saying. And it's really it's skewed, I believe, the perception of what most viewers, listeners, readers have of this country. We don't have an accurate perception of what's really going on. I believe that I know this because I have talked to the original sources. I do see what's happening behind the scenes in decision-making process of what actually goes on the air. And the way these decisions are being made nowadays are not the way they used to be made. And it can be very one-sided. And we are suppressing, in the news business, information that we once used to allow on because it was vetted. All we have to do is question the premise. And if the premise pans out, just put it on. Or if it doesn't pan out, let's call them out and say, they said this, but this doesn't match reality. We don't do that anymore. It's very, very lopsided. And unfortunately, it has led to, I believe, some severe consequences in the way people view this country, the way people view the world. And we have dramatically shifted. If you just look 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the perception of what people have now in this country is drastically different. And it is based, in my opinion, on the news media. What we are telling people is going on. And again, it's just changed. So I think that's a technical thing that has gone on. I've actually left the news business because I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stomach it. So I don't, it's not just the station I was working for, it's the industry in general. And I now do a couple of things. I'm still using my communication skills. I've founded a firm, Tom Jordan Media, to coach people how to communicate well, how to speak to the news media in such a way that your message is going to get through the mischaracterizations. There are ways to answer a reporter that goes against what their intention might be for you. They may have an intention, they likely do when they come to talk to you, but there are ways to answer that reporter's question to kind of throw it back in their face, but put it in such a way that you can't be mischaracterized. So I've done that. And I'm going to start a brand new talk show on a radio station in Detroit in September, which is a very powerful radio station. It's WJR, and it's one of the oldest in the country, and it's a powerhouse in terms of their reach. And I'm incredibly excited to be a part of it, starting in September. So that is an opportunity for us to have all voices on, to get people to talk and really discuss the issues, hold them to task, but do it in a respectful way, but not suppress voices, let them all come on. And so that's what I believe it's a return to, I think, what journalism was supposed to be.
Wow. That's all huge. Yeah. I'm really excited about this. Your Tom Jordan Media. That's Tom Jordan Media, tjordanmedia.com.
TomJordanmedia.com. And it's really just a firm I started because I want to help people. My main job is the talk show. I'm going to be spending 8 hours a day doing that. But this is on the side to really communicate to people, corporate executives, nonprofit executive directors, pastors, other people who are frustrated with, they know they're not getting a fair shake. They won't come on certain stations. I've had many people tell me this. We don't come on that station anymore because we know we're not going to get a fair shake. We're going to say something that we know is true, and the opposite is going to be told in the final broadcast. And it's tragic. We're supposed to be truth tellers. And while we still, I think, advertise ourselves as such, I don't believe it's necessarily the truth.
Yeah. Well, when you bring it, the show's about monetization, right? We're all trying to monetize our creativity, but again, it comes back to the song, right? We were talking about that. If your song is corrupted, then it's really not going to do well, right? If the song is, if it's trying to talk about love, I mean, there's all different ways to talk about a love. We've heard a million songs. I love you. I love you. I love you. But if there's nothing in it that's really truthful about it, and it's just kind of fake, it may have a fun melody. It might last on the charts, may even get on the charts and last 2 weeks. But, I think of someone that I had the opportunity of meeting Lou Gramm from Foreigner. And Remember the song, I want to know what love is, I
want you to show me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all remember that hit if you were around back in 1980 something. But that was a very deep and emotional song. It was huge, giant hit, probably the biggest hit they ever did up to that point. But I remember talking with Lou about that at a coffee house. I asked him, I got an opportunity to record actually at his home studio. And, I remember sitting in coffee, surreal moment, one of these moments, like I'm talking with Lou Gramm. Right. And I said, man, you wrote that song. I mean, what place were you in? And he just said, I was the end of a marriage. I was down in the dumps. I was at the bottom. And I was just crying out for love, and it came from a real place. It came from depth. It came from pain, suffering. It came from, but yet a hope that I could find it again, kind of thing, and, it's almost feels like you're saying a little bit of your story. It's like the media has lost its heart. It's humanity in a sense. It's so about the marketing. It's so about the monetization almost that it's like the advertising dollars is speaking, we've monetized to a place to where truth isn't as important as selling the cheap song, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There was the old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads, meaning if you get a bloody car accident, that's the top story tonight. Well, okay, that's a cheap love song, if you want to call it that. That's going to maybe get a quick viewer here and there, but in the long term, you're going to lose people because A, it's grotesque, and B, it doesn't relate right now to what the viewer is really wanting to know about. And one of the reason why this is heartbreaking to me, you brought up a really good point about that song. I want to know what love is. I think that people, every single individual, they want to be understood. They want to be loved, if you want to couch it that way. And I think that we are so quick to judge others. C.S. Lewis, many years ago, he wrote a book. It was an autobiography when he was a young man, and he was really, even way back then, had a real strong distaste for newspapers because he likened it to gossip, because it was a lot about other people, the worst of humanity, and using real world examples of that. So you can take, let's say it's you, Deven Berryhill. I'm going to go down the list of all the bad things you did yesterday. Well, that's not news. That's being very judgmental. And those very same people that are doing that refuse to look at themselves. And I'm going to bring up the Bible here, Matthew 7, verse 1-6. It talks about, judge not lest you be judged. First look at the log in your own eye. Then you'll see clearly to take that speck out of your brother's eye. But you first got to deal with your own stuff. And what's difficult for me to really deal with, and it's one reason why I left, is we so mischaracterize other people and other businesses and other politicians. We so mischaracterize them and to make other people view them in such a negative light as to dehumanize them, that we're so willing to do that to other people who, by the way, are just like you and me. There's no difference, except that we're going to call them out on the things that they've done wrong. Because why? We're truth tellers. Well, no, if you were a truth teller, you would first deal with the stuff that's going on in your heart. Then you'd have a better context and understanding of what the real problem is. And so it's heartbreaking to me that cheap love song is really what has dominated the news coverage, rather than the real important stuff that does affect humanity. If we dig a little deeper, we let it breathe a little bit longer, we might be able to kind of address some real problems in society and really bring to the forefront what really ails mankind. And then if we're willing, just like you and I are, when we want to receive some criticism or critiques in our own lives, if we're willing to do that, we can become better. If we're willing to acknowledge our sins, and as a whole, as a country or as a group, our collective sins or issues that we need to work on. If we can do that, we'd be a better society. The problem is we're not willing to do that. And it's a sad thing for me as a longtime journalist who really used to love the craft and the industry. I think there's hope. We can definitely get back to it, but I think that we as content creators, we're only responsible for what we do. If you're a content creator, and I'll say this about monetization, there is a real thirst and a real hunger for people to speak truth, whether it's in art, whether it's in news, whether it's in writing a story, whether it's just you and I talking in a podcast.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many ways to meet that need. People are thirsty and hungry for truth. And if we can deliver that, and while at the same time acknowledging our failures and recognizing the truth in our own lives, and we want to do that, man, that's a way to monetize it, because you're doing something that's going to benefit somebody else. It comes down to that: hard work, being honest, being truthful about you and others, and then giving that to other people. I think those are three strong necessities for monetizing creativity.
No, I couldn't agree more. You know, it kind of answers my question. Maybe that's the question I always ask everybody. What would the Tom Jordan of today tell the younger, maybe 20-year-old Tom Jordan? Any words of wisdom you'd go back to that guy and tell him now?
Yes. Yeah, I've thought about that. I think there's a few things. I think you can read. People should read Proverbs, because there's a lot of wisdom in that. But work hard when you're young. Pay the dues when you're young. I probably spent a little bit too much time surfing when I could have been studying. Yeah, we did. And I don't surf now. I would have liked to have reversed it. Surf more now and surf less when I was younger. Because I probably could have studied more and really developed, I think, a greater respect for my parents and for elders at that time. Thankfully, when I was 18, I think I kind of got my head screwed on straight more so in that time. But so I think, take life more seriously when you're young. It's not all about, and people will hear this a lot. Hey, this is your time. This is your phase in life to just go out and, what do they call it? Sow your oats. Yeah, wild oats, exactly. I would say, no, it's not. It's actually a time for you to learn the harder lessons in life. And you'll be surprised when you're 22, 23 years old, you will be so much more mature, so much more that ahead of your peers. So that's one thing I would tell myself. I would say also, be courageous when you're young. Stick close to the truth. Don't do things just to be part of the trend, because trends come and go. People become very shifty. I believe there is a level of truth that is consistent through all eternity. And if we can get close to truth and stay there, even when we have these desires that want to take us elsewhere, they have these shiny objects we want to follow. And that could be a big payout right now, which might not benefit you 3 to 5 years from now. But right now it's looking pretty good. It's pretty tempting. Use some wisdom and judgment, good judgment in that. But yeah, stay close to the truth. Align yourself with that. Be courageous in that, and make a stand with grace, with kindness, but be firm. And I wish I was more firm in some of my early. I shouldn't have compromised too much, I think, in just some of the things, and maybe in my personal life, but also in my professional life. Take a stand. People really want to see somebody who does that, because people, I think, are at home kind of secretly having taken a stand in their heart. And when they see someone else do it, it's inspiring. Mm-hmm. And then you can start a movement just by being a little bit more courageous.
Yeah. Well, man, amazing. Such good stuff there, Tom. Now, you kind of touched on what you're doing now, but I'm assuming we spoke about a month ago. We were on another podcast, or maybe even 2 months ago now, with our friend John Dembeck. He has his podcast, Work and Faith Matters. But you weren't able to tell us the new endeavor, and I think maybe you kind of alluded to it. Do you want to share what's happening coming up soon for you?
Yeah. So in January, I left my news job after 20 some odd years in the news business, and I came close to taking a few other news jobs as well, but I realized that the industry has changed so much that I opted for something else, which is related. And I found it ironic, but I'll tell you why in a moment. But it's a talk radio job with a premier radio station, WJR 760 AM in Detroit. It's the guy that just retired, Frank Beckman. He's a legend in this town and in other states as well, because the signal from WJR goes in. You can hear it down in Florida. You can hear it in Illinois. I was in the Chicago airport and they had a big picture of WJR out there. It's a very well-known Midwest station, but it's fairly down the middle, a little right of center, I think, in their topics that they promote. But the reason why I went there is because I had long conversations with the program directors and the general manager, and what they were wanting to tap into was exactly what I wanted to tap into, was to invite all voices to come on the program, interview them with respect, but also be allowed, which we used to be in the news business, to confront where something just didn't add up. Confront them and ask questions, whether it's the governor, whether it's the president, whether it's a local mayor or a businessman or a nonprofit executive director. Let's talk about some real issues that are on the ground, real life, affecting people in this day and age. Let's talk openly about COVID-19. Let's get experts with a wide variety of opinions, experts, to talk about it. Let's not suppress information, which is kind of what I think we have done. Within the right parameters. We don't want extremists on, but legitimate people who have had respect in their careers up until 2019 or 2020. Let's bring them on. Let's not disrespect them just because we disagree with them. It's an opportunity to go into talk radio. And what I said was ironic about it is I had to kind of leave the news industry because there was so much suppression happening that I've gone to a talk opinion show format to allow, once again, those people that felt that they weren't being given a fair shake. Let's bring them back on. Let's talk. So I'm looking forward to it.
And that happens in September, right?
September, yeah, early September, I'll be going back. I had to wait out a 6-month non-compete. So that's why I'm sitting here in my basement right now talking with you.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I remember you sharing, you couldn't share about it. So,
yeah.
Wow. Well, good for you. I'm really excited for you. And, you've made some tough career decisions. You've made some challenging ones. You've moved out of state. You've allowed yourself to be critiqued. You've had multiple mentors. You worked in community. You've, worked cheaply, and I guess you could say, when you were younger and particularly when you could afford to do that, you have a wife and family that supports you in that. That's just amazing. Those are all basic principles that add up to a fruitful life that's productive, not only monetarily, but personally, and in your life. So you're someone who definitely is someone who has been a creative who thrived, and really appreciate you coming in and telling your story and sharing even the embarrassing moments, the Ron Burgundy moment.
Well, Deven, I so appreciate you and what you're doing, and getting to know you over the past couple of years has been great. And I'm excited about your new podcast. This is such a joy and a benefit to me and to so many others. So congratulations again, and thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's been great.